Hello, everyone. Thank you for virtually joining this talk on designing an online infrastructure for collecting AI data from people with disabilities. My name is Jun Park. I'm a PhD student at Stanford's Computer Science Department, and I am very excited to present our work conducted at Microsoft Research at Redmond, together with my amazing co-authors and mentors, Daniel Bragg, AJ Kamar, and Meredith Ringo Morris. According to the World Health Organization, there are more than 1 billion people, or roughly 1 in every 7 persons worldwide, who experience some forms of disabilities in their lives. In the United States, the reported rate of people with disabilities is even higher, with the most recent 2020 stats from the CDC reporting that 26% of the adults in the United States experience some forms of disability. And while disability comes in various forms, ranging from sensory disabilities, such as blindness or deafness, to cognitive disabilities, such as dyslexia and learning disabilities, and finally to motor disabilities, they all present accessibility barriers to a very large number of people, preventing them from taking advantage of various interactions and opportunities that might otherwise be available to them. We believe that the new generations of AI applications may present really exciting and important opportunities for removing these accessibility barriers to positively influence the lives of people with disabilities. And some of these applications are already being used. For instance, some of us may have heard about or even used image captioning applications like Microsoft Seeing AI or Google Lookout that uses machine vision to tell blind users or low vision users what is in the photo they took. Or various live transcription tools like Dragon Dictate that help deaf or hard of hearing users to communicate with others via written language, or speech generation tools that read out loud written language for those who experience dyslexia. Or even self-driving cars or robotics that are not widely available yet, but can possibly offer a greater mobility for those with motor disabilities. But for these applications to actually benefit people with disabilities, we need to ensure that they are inclusive, that is, effective for this population. And there's a growing concern that AI applications that are trained on the data that does not represent people with disabilities will be ineffective for this population. So if you look at the example applications that we just looked at, prior work has shown that image recognition models trained on photos taken by sighted people often fail to recognize photos taken by blind users due to the differences in lighting or framing. Speech recognition models used to build live transcription tools often fail to recognize people with deaf accent. And motion detection models used to build self-driving cars to detect pedestrians often fail to recognize those in wheelchairs or have some forms of motor disabilities. So the focus of our investigation in this work is to better understand how we can collect AI data that better represent people with disabilities, so we can support building AI applications that are actually effective for this population. But it is worth noting that this can be a challenging task, and our traditional methods for collecting AI data may fail. First, scraping the web may not result in sufficiently diverse data and could also violate the subject's rights and privacy, which can be particularly salient for people with disabilities. Simulating data by having participants without disabilities to pretend to have disabilities, for example, by covering one's eyes to simulate blindness, can result in inaccurate representation of disability and may even backfire by instigating rigid representation of disability. And finally, sourcing data directly from people with disabilities with their proper consent for data collection is, although the most ideal, can be prohibitively expensive, particularly because of the long tail nature of disabilities. So, in order to overcome these challenges, we envision an online infrastructure like a web or mobile application that can be used to enable data collection from people with disabilities. We believe that if successful, such an infrastructure can be used to source data directly from people with disabilities at scale with their proper consent. To this end, we explore three research questions that can inform how we might be able to design such an infrastructure. First, we asked what would motivate people with disabilities to contribute their data? What are people with disabilities' privacy or ethical concerns for contributing their data? And finally, do people with disabilities have the means to collect and upload their data online? Our study design can be described in three stages: recruitment, a 45-minute interview, and finally, online tasks and an exit survey. I will describe each of these components in a little more detail. First, when recruiting participants, we made an explicit effort to recruit a diverse set of participants who experienced different forms of disability. This was so that we can gain generalizable insights across people with different forms of disabilities. So we collaborated with Shepherd Center, which is a rehabilitation hospital in Atlanta, and recruited 30 participants with 4 categories of disabilities: blindness or visual impairment, deafness or hearing impairment, motor or physical disability, and cognitive disability. And in our 45-minute interview, we try to qualitatively probe the motivation and concerns that people with disabilities may have with data contribution. For instance, we asked questions that probe how do our participants understand what AI is and what they are excited about, and what kind of compensation mechanism would they be interested in, as well as questions about their privacy or other personal or ethical concerns for contributing their data. And we finished the study with online tasks and survey. So for the tasks, we chose 6 representative tasks for data contribution based on prior literature. So this included uploading a selfie or videos of the participants speaking or moving. And we actually asked them to try uploading these data. And finally, we had an exit survey that rehashed some of the questions explored during the interview, but now our participants got a chance to answer them in a more quantitative manner after actually having done the data contribution tasks. So what do we find? I will present our results in the order of our research questions, describing our participants' motivation, concerns, and challenges for contributing their data to an AI dataset. First, what motivated and made our participants willing to contribute their data? Overall, our participants were generally open to contributing their data so long as their data is used to help them or their disability communities. P29 mentioned, "I love the technology, and I love the fact that I might be able to contribute to make things better for somebody else." But some of our participants also highlighted a number of elements in the process that may influence their motivation to contribute. For instance, some noted that the data contributed should not reveal any hidden disabilities, such as ADHD, dyslexia, or PTSD, as revealing such disabilities is often optional for those who experience them. Some also specifically pointed out that the data they contributed should not be used for certain purposes, such as for law enforcement or for a company's effort to appear ethical, for instance, for the sake of ethics washing or diversity theater. And some also stressed that they hope the data they contributed actually makes a meaningful difference. Finally, in terms of the method of compensation for their data contribution, our participants generally thought that monetary compensation often provided an added incentive to contribute. But a few noted concerns. For instance, P9 mentioned That might be a pressure point for people. You're selling yourself out a little. In addition, when asked how much would be a reasonable compensation for their data contribution, many of our participants were quite unsure, as can be noted from P15's answer. Oh man, I don't know. I've always been terrible with money. This led some of the participants to be open to other forms of compensation that is not monetary. This included a matching donation to a nonprofit organization advocating for disability justice, credit attribution or offers for publicity through appearing in the product advertisement, and early access to the product that is being developed with their data. Second, what were the predominant concerns our participants had for contributing their data? In general, our participants were not too concerned as a lot of their data is already online, but there were some important caveats. For instance, the data collection process needed to respect the disability culture. P6 noted that for the deaf community, a sign language is considered a cherished cultural element, and stressed that a sign language interpretation should be provided even when a deaf participant is able to read written language. Other participants, such as P20, noted that the data collection process may be particularly performance anxiety inducing for people with disabilities, noting that I've had a lot of difficulty in school and failed out of college. So there's a fear of failure that follows. For such participants, it was important that the process was not punishing them for failing to follow parts of the instruction, for instance, by banning them from making future contributions. And perhaps as expected, some concerns were related to the type of data they were asked to contribute. So when they were asked to contribute their data that could reveal their identity, they were significantly less comfortable to contribute, according to ANOVA and post-hoc tests. Additionally, we find that the type of data collection organization also played an important role in determining the level of comfort our participants felt for contributing. With our participants expressing a greater degree of comfort, once again according to ANOVA and post-hoc tests, if the organization is one that is dedicated to supporting disability communities in some ways. Finally, there were important intersectional concerns our participants noted, particularly around age and race, that suggested that those in the older generation or those who are minorities might be less willing to share their data. For instance, for age, P30 noted that, 50 and older, because they grew up in a generation where having a disability was supposed to be something that is secretive and private, they are less likely to share. And for race, P9 noted that just being a person of disability, also being an African American in today's US climate, I wouldn't want to give anyone an opportunity to discriminate against me. And third, what were the challenges our participants faced when contributing their data online? We find that the challenges our participants experienced interact with the specific types of disabilities they experienced. For instance, participants with physical disabilities noted challenges when holding camera devices or typing. Participants with blindness or visual impairment noted challenges with framing photos and navigating multi-step process. Participants with cognitive disabilities noted challenges with tasks that involved reading or typing, or tasks that took a long time. And finally, participants with deafness or hearing impairment noted challenges that varied with their experience in sign or written language, as well as the deaf culture. And given these challenges, our participants mentioned that to upload their data online, they ended up taking more time than expected, or requested assistance from family members, though some participants noted that they did not have family members around, and could not enlist help even when they wanted to. So, to finish up my presentation here today, I want to note that this is the first step towards building online infrastructures for collecting AI data from people with disabilities. We believe that such online infrastructures could provide very scalable means for directly sourcing data from people with disabilities. And our findings presented here provide nuanced illustration of what would motivate people with a diverse set of disabilities to get involved in such processes, and what sorts of concerns and challenges they might face along the way. And we believe that these will provide the insights necessary to properly motivate and communicate with people with disabilities during AI data collection processes, and to create accessible processes that people with disabilities can actually partake in. Of course, as potential future work, we should note that our findings should be updated as such infrastructures are actually built and released. And in this study, we focus mainly on the perspectives of the data contributors. But there are limitations to this in that for certain topics, like privacy and security, a layperson may not be able to fully predict potential risks. So our findings should be supplemented in the future by expert perspectives. And finally, future work should continue to discuss the normative questions around the role of AI and whether inclusive AI is always the right answer as we try to make our shared environments more accessible for people with diverse abilities. And with that, thank you once again for joining this talk. Paper is available at aka.ms/A11Y data collect. And I look forward to meeting some of our audience during the conference on Monday, March 8th, 2021, during the paper presentation session 2. Thank you once again.